Welcome to This Explainer. Early 20th century modernist literature wasn't just about coming up with new ways to tell a story. It was actually a profound, intense battleground for feminism and gender identity. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how the written word was used to actively dismantle the established order.
Let's kick things off with a pretty crucial question. As those highly oppressive, rigid, late Victorian and Edwardian norms finally began to crack, how did authors actually respond to these shifting societal rules? This was a time when the very definitions of equality, identity, and the power dynamics between men and women were evolving at just breakneck speed.
To get to the bottom of that, we're diving straight into some fantastic expert material prepared by the Department of English over at the Odisha State Open University. Their analysis maps out this incredible literary movement, and it's going to serve as the absolute foundation for our exploration today.
Okay, looking at the historical timeline here, you can really see how this evolution just builds and builds. Back in the late 19th century, we see these severe Victorian constraints, right? Marriage and domesticity are tightly bounding a woman's entire existence. But then, moving into the early 20th century, we witness this massive modernist shift. Suddenly, increasing numbers of women are seeking education, they're entering the workforce, and they're passionately advocating for suffrage. Literature perfectly mirrored this exact tension between tradition and progress, which, as you can see, eventually set the stage for the second wave feminism of the mid-20th century.
And that brings us to Virginia Woolf, absolutely one of the most significant voices in the feminist literary canon. She posed a question that seems super simple on the surface, but was actually completely revolutionary for its time. What does a woman actually need, practically speaking, to create art?
Well, in her enduring 1929 feminist manifesto, Woolf delivered a brilliantly pragmatic answer. She wrote, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." So the big takeaway here is that Woolf wasn't just talking about innate talent, not at all. She was highlighting how the historical exclusion of women from economic and educational opportunities actively silenced their voices. Basically, you can't write a masterpiece if you don't have financial independence or a private space free from constant interruption.
To really drive this point home, and honestly, it's a bit brutal, Woolf imagined a character named Judith Shakespeare, a fictional sister to William Shakespeare. Woolf used Judith as this powerful thought experiment to demonstrate how societal restrictions would have entirely crushed a female genius of equal measure to William. In the story, Judith never gets to write her plays. Her potential is completely thwarted by a society that refuses to educate her or allow her a creative life. It's a stark look at how raw potential is just suffocated by patriarchal norms.
And Woolf masterfully translated this theory right into her fiction. Take her 1927 novel To the Lighthouse, where she expertly juxtaposes two starkly different characters. On one side, we have Mrs. Ramsay. She represents the idealized, self-sacrificing wife and mother, totally embodying the expectation that women exist solely to serve others. On the flip side, we have Lily Briscoe, a single woman who fiercely prioritizes her artistic ambitions over any domestic roles. Essentially, they act as these avatars in a much larger cultural war between traditional domestic servitude and modern artistic independence.
But she didn't stop there. Pushing the boundaries even further, we have to ask, how did Woolf tackle the actual social construction of gender itself? Because for her, it wasn't just about giving women physical space to write. It was about tearing down the psychological boxes society had trapped them in.
To do that, she introduced the concept of the androgynous mind. And this was incredibly ahead of its time. Woolf argued that breaking down the rigid binary between male and female is what actually unlocks humanity's full, unrestricted creative potential. The idea is that creativity truly flourishes only when individuals move beyond those strict gender identities and embrace a much more holistic understanding of themselves.
If you want to see this concept brought vividly to life, look no further than her 1928 novel, Orlando. This is a wild, fantastical narrative where the protagonist lives for centuries and literally changes sex from male to female along the way. Through this journey, Woolf exposes the stark contrast between the privileges and freedoms Orlando enjoys as a man versus the suffocating societal constraints and intense prejudices they encounter after becoming a woman. It is just a masterful critique of how rigid gender roles really are.
Woolf even extended this exact same critique into global politics. In her 1938 essay, Three Guineas, she expertly argued that the very same patriarchal structures oppressing women domestically are directly responsible for the violence and militarism that lead to war on a global scale. She firmly connected the dots, showing that feminism and pacifism are deeply, inextricably linked.
So Woolf is out here examining these massive, broad societal and political structures. But we have to wonder about the other side of the coin, right? How did other modernist writers expose the quiet, intimate, highly psychological battles of domestic life?
Section 1. Catherine Mansfield and the Domestic Frontline. Enter a truly pioneering modernist writer from New Zealand who completely shifted the literary lens, zooming right in on the everyday, middle-class experiences of women trapped by societal expectations.
Mansfield mapped out an incredible scope on this domestic frontline. Using super innovative narrative techniques like stream of consciousness, where you as the reader experience a character's unfiltered, flowing thoughts, she created a deeply psychological critique of domesticity. Just look at the themes she explored: the questioning of class boundaries in The Garden Party, the shattering of domestic illusions in Bliss, the complete disintegration of a marriage in Marriage a la Mode, and the absolute paralysis caused by social propriety in The Daughters of the Late Colonel.
We can see exactly how this works by comparing two of her distinct protagonists. On one hand, you have the empathetic awakening of Laura in The Garden Party, who starts to really question the rigid social boundaries separating her privileged family from the working class. Contrast that with Bertha in Bliss, whose intense emotional awakening is eventually just crushed by infidelity and patriarchal structures. Through them, Mansfield shows exactly how gender and class norms stifle authentic human connection.
She was also just a master at depicting what happens when patriarchy gets inside your head, what we call internalized oppression. In The Daughters of the Late Colonel, the two sisters are so thoroughly dominated by patriarchal control that even after their domineering father dies, they remain completely paralyzed. They're terrified of the ghost of his expectations. It really reveals the immense psychological toll of ingrained societal norms.
So, taking a step back and looking at these incredible literary breakthroughs from authors like Woolf and Mansfield, how did their pioneering work set the stage for the stories we tell today?
Well, this legacy builds directly over the last century. Step 1, the early modernists broke taboos by exposing psychological realities and the fluidity of identity. Step 2, this laid the direct groundwork for second-wave feminist writers, think Margaret Atwood and Sylvia Plath, who tackled systemic issues and mental health. Moving to step 3, that evolved into global intersectionality, where authors like Toni Morrison and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie highlight how race, class, and colonialism intersect with gender. And finally, today, this lineage flows directly into queer theory and LGBTQ+ literature, with writers like Ocean Vuong resisting traditional categorizations entirely.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider this. The literary battles fought by Woolf, Mansfield, and their contemporaries a century ago literally paved the way for our modern understanding of identity. They proved that literature isn't just a mirror reflecting society, it is a hammer used to shape it. But the work isn't done. So ask yourself, how are the stories, the movies, and the media you engage with right now continuing that legacy? Are they actively challenging the rules of gender, or are they quietly reinforcing them?